Welcome to the Transform My Dance Studio podcast, the only podcast dedicated to helping you grow your dance studio while reclaiming your life. It's Clint Salter here, the CEO and founder of the Dance Studio Owners Association. And for the next 8 weeks, we're bringing you a very special series of podcast episodes with dance studio owners Jane Gretsch and Melanie Gard, who are also part of our Inner Circle program. Over these next 8 episodes, Jane and Mel will be sharing their own challenges, successes, experiences, and advice as dance studio owners. Welcome to this very special podcast event, At The Barre with Jane and Mel. I hope you enjoy it.
Hello and welcome to the At The Barre podcast, a podcast for dance studio owners by dance studio owners. My name is Melanie Gard and I am joined by my delightful friend Jane Gretsch. How are you today, Jane?
Hello. Very well, thank you for asking. And you, Miss Mel?
I'm so good. I mean, we keep saying this, but it really is my favourite time of the week because we get to have a little bit of chat before we start and catch up.
That's right, isn't it? I mean, I do enjoy our At The Barre conversation very much, but I enjoy the one away from the bar as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I was reflecting with you before, I was feeling a little bit like a punching bag this week. It's been one of those really not, necessarily bad weeks, but just a busy week with lots of things flying my way. So perhaps need to go back and listen to our podcast on resilience myself. And
little tests on the way, aren't there?
Yeah.
And yes, I know exactly how you feel. It does just kind of add up every now and then, and take a breather, have a chat with a friend, and here we are.
Have a bucket of coffee and everything's good in the world.
Correct.
Now today we've chosen the topic of inclusion, which is a bit of a buzzword in this day and age. But going back 20 or 30 years or so, it wasn't really a word that was very well used. And I guess today we're using the word inclusion in the context of including children and people with disabilities and additional needs within the context of our dance studio environments. I've got a little bit of a background in working with people with disabilities, so I guess I'll say that up front. But even before that, so before I studied, so I did a degree in disability studies and psychology, I grew up in a family, a small family. I didn't have a large family. I was one of 3 children, but not many cousins or anything like that. But my grandfather's brother, my Uncle Brian, had Down syndrome. And every family gathering, so whether that be Christmas or Easter or a birthday, we would spend with Uncle Brian. So he was very much a part of our family. And at one point he was one of the oldest people in Victoria and I think Australia at one point living with Down syndrome.
Right.
Because back when he was born, the lifespan for people with Down syndrome wasn't very long.
Yes.
But Uncle Brian was born in a time where that started to change. And so I grew up with him in and around my family environment, and we just adored Uncle Brian. He was very much part of our family, and it just kind of felt normal for him to be there.
Of course.
So I guess sort of looking back, that did kind of inform and inspire me to go into that area. So it's an area that I've always been passionate about. I guess it's probably also worth you maybe talking a little bit, Jane, about your interest in inclusion because you also are passionate about this area. So maybe you want to tell us a little bit about your interest in it.
And when I was thinking about what to chat about with you today, I wanted to kind of also broaden, I guess, the idea of being an inclusive studio to not only the more obvious, I guess, children with additional needs, but also about being an inclusive studio of all people. So, and what I mean by that is that at my studio, every face has a place. That's one of our catchphrases. And we do that because we recognise that dance is so powerful for so many people, and that all shapes and sizes are welcome and all personality types, and that sometimes the dance studio can be a safe haven. So I want to kind of talk about that as well at some point, because I'm not suggesting that doesn't always happen, but I think that it's worth bringing to the conversation. In terms of inclusion in the more traditional sense, I have actually a bit of a funny story to tell. So I've done, I want to champion the work of Tricia Gomez. I've done her Rhythm Works Integrative Dance course, and I know one of your team members has as well. And I want to champion the work that she does and raise her up, because she really has been a catalyst for change in the industry. I first met Tricia in 2016 at Disneyland, where she was running one of the workshops with my students who were there very wide-eyed. And at the beginning of the workshop, I was feeling a little bit anxious because I'd actually taken, in honour of the philosophy that I've just shared, anybody was allowed to join our tour to Disneyland. There were no auditions or anything like that. And I had a dancer, one of my adult dancers who was nearing 40 at the time, and who did have some additional learning needs. So I shared that with Tricia because I was a little bit anxious about how that participant was going to go in the workshop, because I wasn't sure of the content and the pace and things like that. And Tricia was so gracious and sweet in her response. You know, she just suggested that she had some knowledge in the area. and yeah, well, she didn't let on, and that's why the story is so funny. She just suggested that, you know, she would look after her, and was very humble in the way she answered the question. Anyway, that was April 2016. And then, of course, in October 2016, she brought her Rhythm Works Integrative Dance training to the Gold Coast at a dance education summit that we had here. And I sat there going...
It was amazing, wasn't it?
Yeah, and I thought, you little devil. Because her phrase really was, oh, yes, I've had some experience in that area. So I loved that. I love that we were able to take that participant with us, and at no time, you know, did we ever kind of try and put her at the back or anything like that. I think everybody needs to be celebrated for what they bring to the stage or the studio. So anyway, that's my little funny story.
That is a wonderful story, and I'm sitting here as I'm sort of going back in time now, and I might be a little bit retrospective in this podcast, but so when I started working in the disability sector, I was working in an area that was very sort of, we were a bit on the fringe. We were seen as the rebels. We were in the recreation team, and everything we did was about trying to get opportunities for people with a disability in the community. Right. And I mean, had someone in my team spoken to someone like you at that point, I mean, we would have been having a party in our office to think that there were people like you in the community that were receptive and open and willing to, accept people that have different, learning needs. We would have just been beside ourselves. So a lot of the work that I did, we would go and work with community houses, neighbourhood houses, we call them in Australia, leisure centres, those sorts of places, and we would work within those organisations to look at their structures, so things like their staff induction, their team training. We would run disability awareness training. We had all these modules that we'd go out and run for these community centres, so that when they had people with disabilities come in, they knew what to do, they knew what resources and supports they could access. And it was a hard slog back then, let me tell you, because it wasn't really the done thing.
No.
And back then, most of the services were sort of buildings, and people were sort of housed in group homes and went to day centres. And whereas now there's a big shift in the way that services are provided to people with a disability and their families, and that's part of what I wanted to talk about today. Context being that we're talking from an Australian perspective, but I know that our service system is reasonably similar to the UK. I'm not as au fait with the systems in America and beyond. But basically what happens now is that families are given funding and support directly, whereas before they would have been given funding through a service. So they'd have to go and access a service. Now in Australia, there's a scheme called the National Disability Insurance Scheme, where families are given funding to be able to use that money. So they can use that money, and we've got some of our customers at the moment that use those funds to pay for their dance lessons. So I just wanted to sort of put that context around the kind of world that we're operating in now is quite different to, 20 years ago. And to me, that's a wonderful opportunity for us to open up those conversations with families about how we can resource and support them with other services as well.
Yes.
Because acknowledging that sometimes it's not just as easy as saying, oh, sure, come and do a class.
No,
There's
it's
so
not.
many other things that, need to happen around that. So I thought it was worth talking through what kind of strategies we both use when we do get an approach from a family that has a child with additional needs, and I'll just use that term broadly.
Yeah. Yes, well, that's easier in this conversation. And I think the thing that maybe sometimes people get nervous and scared about is because the students do present a little bit differently, and they do have what can be seen as challenges, but then they also so does every child actually, or student, if we really look closely enough. So the training that I've done has impacted, I actually feel should be base level training for every teacher, because all of the things, particularly that I learned in, let's say, Trisha's course, because it was dance and movement based, I've applied to every student in the room, and everyone's benefited from that. But anyway, my point was that often the lack of action comes from fear, and the fear comes from lack of knowledge. So if you've got the desire to include students of all abilities in your studio, but you're scared, the way to get around that is actually do a course and get the knowledge, because once you've got the strategies, it really is look, I'm not going to lie, it's challenging, but it's joy-filled. And so what I'm trying to say,
picking up on that, sorry, Jane, just picking up on that point about, being open to working with people, it's been a bit of a journey, I think, for the dance industry, and I'm seeing lots of change now. There's lots of lovely videos that get shared on Facebook of kids, kids in wheelchairs and of all abilities dancing, and people celebrating and being really inspired by that. But I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes, whilst dance can be really inclusive, it can be really exclusive as well.
Yes.
And I think it's important to acknowledge that inclusion is a spectrum.
Yes.
So it's not to say that, yes, we may in our studios have some elite performers and students that are working to a very high level. And so it's not about discouraging that, because we want to encourage and nurture talent where it's there. But I look at it as a spectrum, so that when students come to us, that we have a layered approach and a way that they can come into our studio, whether that be once a week or 6 or 7 times a week, being really open to the idea that anyone can come into your studio and look at the way that the classes are structured and what's going to work for them. So it's not about standing there and going, well, everyone should be in this elite program and it should be open to everyone. I think that's where we can get a little bit caught up. I don't know if I've expressed that very well, actually.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And it does need to be, we need to be meeting the needs of each individual student. And even I'm actually got in my heart and in my head a couple of my students at the moment who are on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, but present, in an everyday sense, fairly closely aligned with the behaviours of other students in their class.
Yeah.
However, there are some underlying things at play there that I need to address in a very gentle and quiet way. So their journey is going to be very different to another child. And it might be that simple things. One child I'm thinking of now who is very sensitive to the noise level of the room, which we were chatting about before we came on, and needs the music to not be too loud. And that can be a simple thing of about not even putting her, one of my bars is quite close to one of the speakers, about not putting her in that spot. Not just, as simple as that, knowing that the level of the noise can cause her to be upset. It can be distressing for her, and the simple fix to that is just not forcing her, for want of a better word, to stand in that spot.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely.
It can be as simple as that, but you then really have to know, you have to have the tools and the strategies. You have to do the research or do the training so that when a child presents with a certain behaviour, you can think, what's the trigger for that? What might be the issue? Because sometimes they can vocalise it, and in this situation, she did. She said, oh, the music's too loud. Now, maybe previously I might have said to a student, oh, fiddlesticks, oh, go on with your bother. It's not that loud. We need to be able to hear it. Whereas I've gone, oh, okay, she's a little bit sensitive to the noise level. That is an indication of this. And sometimes it can be, how close they're standing to people, their tights, their stockings might be something that's a trigger, and you've got a hard and fast rule about all students must wear ballet stockings. But if that's really causing some discomfort, then how important is that rule? So knowing those little things and being flexible in your approach. One thing Tricia said to me was, dance teachers can get funny about those kind of things. And I remember with my boys, hip hop, I used to say, come on in, take off your shoes. And now I've learned that you should not really get boys to take off their shoes, and that's for different reasons. But now I say, take off your shoes if you want to, because some of my boys actually don't want to. It makes them feel vulnerable or whatever it makes them feel. And so I say, take off your shoes if you want to or not, does it change the experience? Hell no. No, it doesn't. So really, go for it, boys.
Yeah, that's right. And it is, I think that's what I was trying to reflect on before, that in dance we have some really strong traditions, don't we, that have, been around for 100 years, and this is the way it was done when I was a kid and all that sort of stuff. And that kind of is a little bit entrenched, I think, in all of us. Yeah. Particularly ballet dancers, the tights and the leotard and the hair's a certain way. And I am a traditionalist, I love the history particularly behind ballet, but me too.
You've got to question it sometimes.
You do. And going back to having my own children, and my own children don't necessarily have any additional needs, but one of my kids is really super sensitive, like to putting on socks. Like if there's a certain, like a seam, it's so distressing for her. And you would just think, I would have just thought, 10 years ago, oh, come on, just put your socks on. You're being ridiculous. But it's like sensory overload for her. And if those socks are in a wrong position, I've learnt now which socks I need to buy. It just overwhelms her. And so now as a parent, you can see the ramifications of that. Like that would affect our entire morning.
Of course, yes. And I'm a bit like that. I see clothes sometimes and I think, oh, that's really nice. And then I put it on and I think, oh, I won't end up wearing that. That's causing me to be completely distracted by whatever on the clothes, and I just won't end up wearing that. And the same with, I like things in a certain way in terms of order, and I'm a bit ritualistic. And so for some students, the ballet class is very calming because we do have a kind of order to it. We generally start at the bar and then go to the centre and then move across the room. And when you start to change things up a little bit, it can be distressing. My son Liam can be quite like that. He's very orderly. In some aspects of his life, let's say, not all. But he doesn't respond well to change. That causes him stress. Now, I don't want my students to be stressed, so I'm not going to change things up just to entertain myself. I need to know the children in my room and make sure that I'm respecting, where they're at, because otherwise...
Yeah, absolutely. And it is about mutual respect, isn't it? It's that... two-way street that we're here, we're offering a dance class, and there are certain traditions and, rules, if you like, around that. But we've also got to respect the children that are coming inside that space and understand where they're at socially, emotionally, stuff that might be going on for them at home.
Yes, and that takes some time and investigating. You actually have to be invested in that child. So that might take a phone call to the parent. Most classes, the parents can be drop the children off and pick them up, and everybody's happy. Yeah. But you have to really be invested in what you're doing, and that's going to take some emails and some phone calls, and working in collaboration with the parent, because sometimes what is best for the child is not always obvious, or the behaviour they're displaying might almost be contradictory to what they need. And I think probably, and I'll let you talk, I know I'm getting excited here, but behaviour is communication. So what are the stories that are being told to you through behaviour? That's a big one.
Yeah, absolutely. And this comes back to your own organisation's culture and your investment in, because it's not as simple as teach a class, go home. We all know that. But if you're invested as an organisation in making the experience the best that we can for those students in the room, then part of your culture will be about doing that further work, whether that's the phone call to the mum or the quick chat after class or an email, to gather that information. Because, and that was one of my, when we get to our top 3 tips, was that idea of collaboration, that as teachers, yes, we are knowledgeable when it comes to teaching our dance classes, and we have educational background and all those sorts of things, but we don't know every child. The parent, and we know as parents, we know every little thing about our children, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Over and above. I mean, we could write books about our own children,
Until they get to a certain age. And then I think I'm finding there's a little bit of mystery, Miss Mel. And maybe there's some things I don't, and you and I are both entering that whole new world of parenting teenagers. But certainly I do agree. There's a little twinkle in my eye.
I hear you, sister. But yeah, it's just that idea of collaborate, open up the conversation with the parent. Sometimes the parent will just say, oh, look, just make sure you don't do X, Y, and Z. And you go, oh, easy. I can make, like your example with the music. That's so easy.
So easy.
And it makes it easy for everyone. But sometimes it does require a little bit more unpacking. The other thing that we do within our studios, we've got some good relationships with a couple of the local schools and some service providers, occupational therapists and speech pathologists. So when a child might be going and receiving some additional supports, we always say to the parent, get some tools, get some tips, tell them that your child's dancing. What can we do in our studios to make the experience the best that we can for this child? So, there's all sorts of resources out there. We're not the only ones that can inform what happens inside the classroom. And I, like you, am a massive fan of Trish Gomez. one of my teachers has done the training. We've implemented so many of her strategies just across the board because it makes sense. So, I mean, that would be one recommendation. If you haven't heard of Trish, go look her up.
Look, absolutely recommend her work, and it's based on research and experience.
Yes.
So don't go and reinvent the wheel. It is a brilliant starting point and inspiring to boot. Yeah, absolutely. I am an ambassador of that course, and like I said, I really do feel like it's base level. It should be something that every dance teacher does, because when I did that course a couple of years ago now, so just after 2016, I had been teaching for quite a while. Oh God, I don't even know. Let's not go there, but quite a while, and I was feeling very, very competent, but this just opened up a whole new world to me, and it enhanced every way, every class I teach with that at the back of my mind now. What a difference it's made to my students and me. You mentioned the culture too of the studio. I think we must, if you want to have an inclusive studio, then I talk a lot about leadership, but whatever culture you're trying to curate, that must be from the leader down. So it's no good just having the want or the desire, but you must model it. You must put perhaps children that are a little bit more challenged in the front row at performance and recital. Don't always have the children that struggle with their learning in the back row. Because what message does that send? So look at your words and your behaviours and see about how you're leading this culture within your studio, because where the leader goes, the people go. So if you want this, then you have to be the change you want to see.
Oh, Jane.
Jane's ranty pants.
Jane.
Ranty.
Sister.
Ranty pants.
I've got goosebumps because that's everything. That is absolutely everything. And if there were more if there were more Janes in the world.
I tell you what, I'm really enjoying these podcasts, Mel, because I really enjoy it when you say nice things about me. This is really, it's so good for my ego. And you know what? I know you feel the same way, Mel, and I know lots of people do. All right, I know lots of people do. So stand up.
It's so heartening. Like, can I tell? I'm going back to the old days. This is in the 90s when I was working in the sector, and there was this whole push there was a word that we used to use called normalisation. So it was about trying to make everyone normal. Like, I mean, that's...
Oh, good luck with me.
Yeah. And, I mean, that's what is normal. And we have moved so far away from that, in terms of knowing that there are different ways to include and celebrate people and celebrate difference. That to me is just, and that's what people respond to. I mean, even when you just see these little videos that go around on Facebook, I mean, the response that they get is huge. It resonates with people because it strikes a chord that, we are all different and unique, and that's something to be celebrated as much as our sameness. Yes,
as much as we're the same, we're different, and as much as we're different, we're the same, and it's wonderful, isn't it? Yeah,
absolutely. So we probably need to wrap up soon. The other thing I wanted to just go back to was the point around different ways to include people in your studio. And we've talked a little bit about the individual and just making little tweaks within classes. We've actually started a specific class at our studio this year based on Trisha's work, the Rhythm Works class. And I'm really excited to see where that leads us as a studio, because we have lots of kids that come in and are involved in classes in different ways. So kids that are on the autism spectrum and have different learning needs. But this class is a really specific class using the Rhythm Works structure, and it's going beautifully at the moment. We're so thrilled with it. I'm looking forward to seeing how that evolves in our studio so that we can build on that and bring people through our studio in different ways. So I guess the point being that there's not a right or wrong way to include people, that there are different ways that we can do that. And again, going back to that idea that inclusion is a spectrum.
Yes, and dance is so powerful, as is music. It would be a shame not to use that gift, that dance and music can give to everyone, really. I feel like that's why I get so passionate. And sometimes I'm pretty sure my teachers roll their eyes at me. I'm feeling a little bit frustrated with them this week. I'll put that out there in that. Sometimes I get so fired up because I feel like shaking everybody gently and saying, but can't you see what dance can do? Can't you feel what dance can do? Can't you remember what dance did for you? Because we get busy, right? We get busy in the mundane busyness of life. But every day I remember that. That's like, bing, I open my eyes and it's like this thing that I carry with me everywhere. And I get that that's a bit intense and a little bit over the top. I'm fully accepting of that. And there's plenty of people in my life to remind me. But, and they do. But, why not dance? And so why not create this class like you have? Why not? Yeah. Tell me why not?
Yeah, I know. And look, coming back to that point again about the dance industry in general, it's actually acknowledging that it's actually challenging, that, everyone wants, not everyone, I'll say that again. When it comes to dance, there's often that idea of wanting perfection and, presenting something. So this idea that our students represent our studio. Yeah. And, so people often put that out, they want their best dancers out there front and centre representing, this is a quality of training at my studio. And what I would like to see within our industry is a shift in that mindset, that we also celebrate the quality of our teaching by lifting up those kids that aren't necessarily going to be professional dancers, but what a gift to give them that opportunity to be on stage and hear the thunderous applause and be celebrated for giving it a go. So many times the parents say to me, I would never do that. I would never get up on stage and do that. That's amazing, Everyone deserves that opportunity to be celebrated in that way and overcome their fears, because it's a big thing getting on stage.
And it can be life-changing. I mean, I started our conversation talking about that adult student that I took to Disneyland. Now, I'm telling you that it was my dream come true too, but it was actually her dream come true. That was life-changing for her. Life-changing that she was accepted in the group. It was life-changing for the other students in the group. That's powerful. You can't. Yeah. I don't know what else to say about it.
Like that stuff is what I hold. I mean, unlike you, Jane. I mean, we're preaching.
We're silks. Yeah.
But like I've got some students that have grown up with me in the studio. A couple of them that are on the autism spectrum, and we had some tough years there in, managing behaviours and relationships inside the studio. And these young people now are heading into being young adults and finishing school, and the conversations I have with their parents are pretty much that dance saved the day. That our studio was the safe haven. It was the place that they could come and be themselves and learn skills as well that then they could transfer back into their lives. It's pretty much what's got them through that schooling. School can be a really hard place for kids that are on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And that stuff, like I'm like, that's it.
That's
if
right.
I retire, I'm happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
As much as I like to say, I like to tell you about my students that are off doing full-time and going to be dancers, and I adore them.
That has a place. Yep.
It does. It does have a place, but those other stories just, I put my head on my pillow at night and I know that I'm doing something that's, life-changing.
Yeah, and we all need a champion. There's that great TED Talk. Help me out here, Rita. And
she's beautiful.
Every child needs a champion anyway. If you look up TED and Rita, every child needs a champion, you'll find her.
Stunning talk.
And that's the truth of it. And not every child needs a champion. Every person. How do you know someone needs support? Because they're breathing, right? Every person needs a champion, and it's an honour to be able to provide that to lots of people.
And there's studies on depression too, that for people recovering from depression, the commonality of just having one person that believed in them gave them hope.
Yeah.
And if we can be that person, that thread that lifts people out of that spiral of depression, and that's a powerful thing too.
Yeah, beautiful.
Changing the world.
One little dance step at a time. Exactly. So are we up to our top three tips?
So Jane, we're going to finish up now. We're going to wrap up with our top 3 tips. Over to you.
Okay. My first one is get help. So get knowledge, get help. Do a training course, research, read, absorb, observe, and that will help. If you do have any fear surrounding creating more inclusive experiences for your students, that's going to empower you to really make a difference. So that's the first one. The second one is about the students, and you really do need to be a behaviour detective sometimes. So and I mentioned that before, behaviour is communication, and sometimes the stories or the communication that's presented to you can be a bit confusing and sometimes confronting, but the more knowledge you have, and you get better over time, there's a bit of trial and error here, the better you get at deciphering that. And the last one really is just to honour the child or honour the student. It's a unique journey for every student, and to really work in partnership, and I know you're going to touch on that too, but work in partnership with the parent or the guardian to best honour that child, so that you know that you are serving them to the best of your ability. Beautiful, Jane.
Funnily enough, my top 3 tips are quite similar.
And we don't talk about these, do we? Before
we don't.
Come on,
we don't.
No.
Yeah. So my first one is being open-minded. So I love the phrase, the mind is like a parachute. It only works if it is open. So just because things have been done a certain way for 150 years in classical ballet doesn't mean that we can't unpack that and look at different ways of doing things. And I think as business owners, we are in such a unique position to be able to do that. We are the captains of our own ship, as we say, and we can do this how we want to. Unlike funded services, they're bound by funding guidelines and all these regulations. We aren't. We're in this really unique position. So to me, that's really exciting. What the other tip is, something you touched on, is collaboration. So collaborate with the child's family, with any other service providers that you can, with other DSOs. So, talking with other people that include kids with disabilities into their studios. Gather your resources and collaborate with those people to make sure that you're doing the best that you can in that setting. And leadership, we did touch on this point during the podcast. Where the leader goes, your team will follow. So if you are leading within your studio, if you are passionate about inclusion, your team will follow and be a part of that. So I'd encourage people to step up to that and know that we are in a really unique position to be able to do that.
Yep, amen. Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful. Wow.
So beautiful. And in honour of my great-grandmother who pulled out her 11-year-old son, Brian, from school and refused to put him in an institution and kept him at home and a part of his local community, I'm really happy to have this conversation today.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful way to finish too. Thank you, Miss Mel.
All right. Thanks, Miss Jane. I look forward to talking to you again next week.
Oh, yeah. Well, hopefully. I mean, this is the end of our first season.
Oh, yes.
Actually, we should probably comment on that.
Yes.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, eight episode today. So end of the first season. So hopefully we will having more conversations. But you and I know we'll talk regardless.
Yeah,
no one can
definitely. And thank you to the amazing Clint Salter for giving us this opportunity. We're both very proud members of Dance Studio Owners Association and the Inner Circle. It's a great resource. We encourage people to look up the website and the Facebook pages. If you're not already a member, it is a great program and so many tools and resources. I can't keep up with it all, Jane.
No. And it's a unique little environment that is created, very much built on passion and purpose. And I'm always very humbled to contribute in the way that I do as a coach in both the Inner Circle and the association. But I'm going to tell you that I learn as much as I give. I've been a studio owner, as you know, for 12 years, and I'm gaining a lot of valuable information from being a participant as well. So we are grateful for this opportunity and appreciate the somewhat of a risk of letting us go live.
And sometimes a little bit rogue, Jane.
Yes, I'll admit that I am likely to sometimes go rogue, and for that I apologise. But I feel like I was very well behaved today.
Yeah, I think we're very well behaved.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Miss Mel.
All right. Thanks, Miss Jane.
Bye for now.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of our exclusive series At The Barre, powered by the Transform My Dance Studio podcast. For more training, resources and support specifically for dance studio owners who are wanting to grow their business while reclaiming their life, we'd love you to join us in the Dance Studio Owners Association. For all the information, go to dsoa.com. Take care and we'll see you next week.